Welcome to the Townbuilders podcast. I'm your host, Levi Wentz. Townbuilders is produced by the NTBA, the National Townbuilders Association, implementers of the new urbanism. Find out more at ntba.net. This podcast is sponsored by James Hardie, what the best are made of. James Hardie is America's #1 brand in siding. Their product is elegant and durable and is sure to elevate any building or development. So if you want to find out more, go to jameshardie.com or find them at your local building supplier. Hello, friends. Today, I'm joined by Rob Parker, a purpose-driven leader and president of the National Townbuilders Association. Rob is also the co-founder of the Town at Trillith, a new community south of Atlanta. Trillith is one of the coolest neighborhoods, those are Rob's words, not mine, and one of the best examples of new town building happening in the world. What ties all of Rob's life work together is a commitment to people and a belief that new places can be more than just functional or profitable. They can actually foster human flourishing. In this conversation, we dive into Rob's why and how his background in leading nonprofit work helped him go from shaping people to shaping environments. We discuss the topic of human flourishing and touch on a new global flourishing study led by Harvard, Baylor, and Gallup that may use neighborhoods like Trillith to help understand how human flourishing is tied to our built environment. This study may help prove what we already know anecdotally about how design impacts human well-being. We also talk about the future of the NTBA and how the next generation can get into this line of work. It starts with deep purpose. Real estate development can and should be more than just spreadsheets and permits. I think Rob would say that at its best, town building is a way of loving people through place. This is a very pertinent conversation to what we do as designers and developers, so I hope you get a lot out of it. And thank you for listening to Townbuilders. Well, we just found out that we were not recording for the last 20 minutes of what was just one of the most fantastic conversations, I think, has ever happened. And unfortunately, you guys won't get to hear that, but maybe we can replay part of it here. So, Rob Parker, welcome to the Townbuilders podcast.
Well, Levi, it's great to be with you a second time.
It really is wonderful. You know, I feel like we're doing a daily double here. So we have an exciting conversation to get to on human flourishing and that sort of thing. But since we're talking about something that's so purpose-driven at its core, I actually wanted to start a little differently and ask the question that I usually like to ask at the end of podcasts, which is, what is your why? You know, you are the president of the Townbuilders Association. You're on the board at CNU. Most recently, you joined the board at the Seaside Institute. And of course, you're CEO at Trillith and have been in the town building space. So what launched you into this career of town building and placemaking?
Well, Levi, first I need to let you know that I am no longer the CEO at Trillith. I am made a transition and given up the day-to-day responsibilities. I will always be one of the co-founders. Dan Cathy, our founder, has been very generous in including me in that way. And I'm helping with the history and some of the work that we're doing ongoing to support other town builders. It's given me some space to be able to do the kind of things that we're talking about right now. Actually, I'll tell you really quickly, I had an opportunity to host a panel at CNU, and I asked these very smart people with lots of initials behind their name to introduce themselves like they were at a kindergarten career day. And it was really revealing to watch these guys who were used to being introduced, you know, with all of their accolades, to have to say, listen, I draw pictures of houses so that builders can build them. And it forced me to do the same thing. And so I introduced myself and just said, I'm Rob, and I'd like to help people build cool places. And so there's a little bit more to it than that, but fundamentally, that's what I care about right now, is helping. How do we build really remarkable, special places that have human impact? And so my why is grounded in mission and purpose, and was very fortunate that we had a founder who was very interested in not only what we were doing in our particular part of the world, but how it could affect an industry, in this case, the film and television industry, how people could live better lives and tell better stories as filmmakers if we created a great environment for them to do that. And then it connected to my past 20 years in the nonprofit space, where it was all about creating environments where people could literally live their best lives or better lives, improve their human condition through Boys and Girls Clubs, through Ronald McDonald House Charities, through Kiwanis International, and some other great charities that all, again, were very purpose and mission driven. So this idea that we could do that in placemaking and town building, it really, really spoke to my heart. And that's why I've been passionate about it for the last 10 years.
So you came from this background in nonprofit, and you're talking about shaping individuals. I know that you have a deep background in leadership, and you're very passionate about leadership, and that's sort of shaping people there. Have you seen similarities in the attributes of what you've learned in leadership and shaping people, and how that applies to shaping environments and placemaking?
I think so. I'll go back to in the Boys and Girls Club environment, where we were working with the 50 million young people that live in poverty. Many of them are most disadvantaged environments. And watching young men and women grow and develop, I would say there were two words. One, it was you needed to provide hope that the world could be better, that their lives could be better, but you also needed to create opportunity. So hope without opportunity just leads to frustration. So they needed a path towards college, or needed a path towards a job. They needed a path out of public housing, out of gangs, et cetera. So in a very real way, hope and opportunity play well together. For me, I mean, it's not as dramatic as that in the, or as on point as that in placemaking and in town building, but it's very much about creating an environment, creating a place, both the physical and the hardware and the software of what we've built, but also how it's populated and how we behave and how we live together that causes this idea of human flourishing, which is, I know, a topic that we want to go and do a deep dive into.
Yeah, flourishing is a really interesting topic, because as I got into this career that I'm in now, when we were building Woodbury, we did our initial mission vision statements for that, and human flourishing was something that we kept coming back to. It's a term I'd never used in my life before, I don't think, but my partner kept coming back to it. And then as I got introduced to the NTBA, I had noticed that was the language other people were using as well. So why do you think that's been the term that's risen to the top of our minds and dialect?
Well, I would say there are easier ways to make money in real estate than in the town building placemaking that we do. So I sense that the people that we work with that are attracted to this care about people, care about this community building in a deeper way. What I'm excited about is this idea that if you set out to do good, you will actually do great. And I do believe in this space that by going and doing the extra things that creates a better community, that people will fall in love with it, and they will want to live there, and you will be successful with it. And we've been very fortunate in a short amount of time to prove some of that financially, when we didn't set out with that as our primary objective. But we're selling our houses at Trillith, by example, at 3 times the local market. You can get a much larger home on a big lot close by for a fraction of what you can at Trillith, but there's something that is magical about the way this has come together with the built environment and how people live together there. It causes people to want to do that. So I'm excited about this idea of, can we measure that a little bit? Can we figure out, not just anecdotally telling stories about how people are living their best lives, but can we demonstrate that? And so I'm excited about some of the work that's being done to prove that what we are experiencing is real.
Before we get into that flourishing measure, would you be able to speak a little bit more to what you're just talking about? Because while we're not in the nonprofit space, we're in the for-profit space, and
we are definitely in the for-profit space.
While there's easier ways to make money, we at the end of the day do want to make some money, and so. But I think that purpose-driven approach leads people to that same end that you were just talking about, or at least the belief that if you do good, great things will come. You'll be financially blessed in one sense. So what is your experience? What have you seen? Are there anecdotes you can point to of great service being a good business model?
Well, I'll go back to the one thing that I didn't talk about in addition to the nonprofit space was working with a well-known artist. And his passion for music is only eclipsed by his passion for kids and creating environments for especially kids with special needs. And he set out from the very beginning of his career with that idea in mind. And along the way has executed that and has done incredibly well. So I watched that happen. I watched somebody who literally from the beginning, they didn't say, listen, when I make it, when I win the lottery, I'm going to make a big contribution. So setting out, I think, intentionally. So I experienced it personally. And in this space, what we've witnessed is that along the way, we were making decisions, hundreds of decisions, intentional decisions about how we were going to do our public spaces, whether we were going to be gated or not, whether you needed to be qualified in some way related to the film and television industry. So it was all about inclusion. And again, a ton of decisions along the way, design decisions that were all designed to welcome people in and be as inclusive as possible. Investments in things that caused people to really enjoy life. And we can talk about some of those things. But again, the results were even our multifamily. We set out to prove literally that multifamily and single family homes can be adjacent to each other and that we can live together and that we can thrive together. And they literally, Levi, you've been to Trillith, they're on the same street right across from each other. And in most environments, that's just not done. People think that somehow your property values are going to go down if you've got multifamily adjacent to your single family homes. And it's proven to be the absolute opposite. So I would say going against convention a little bit, making the decisions that are people focused and results focused has given us a financial result that we've been very much rewarded by.
There's places that people go to that have that social programming and see the effort that goes into maintaining that.
Yeah.
And I think there's a false idea that once I build all this out and make enough money, then we can pour it back into the programming. But what you're talking about is something that was foundational to what you guys were doing.
Yes.
You were doing it even when you're poor, and now that you're people think that you're just doing it now because you're wealthy.
Yeah, I think just having a mission in general is really, really important, and a why. So for us, and I want to be really cautionary and say that I'm describing an experience with the town at Trillith that some of which will relate, many of which I hope will relate, but some of the things that are specific to us. So for us, our target audience was a next generation of storyteller, a movie maker, film and television, and that we were in essence creating a company town for the film industry. But rather than just do workforce housing, by the way, that was the need that we were trying to meet, was where are these people going to live? And we could have done that. We could have done that with a lot less resources than to create a town, a new urbanist town in the way that we have. But the idea that our visionary, our chief visionary had was that if people lived better lives, they'd tell better stories. And couldn't we use better stories that we could consume, the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves and that we tell others? And so by having that why, it caused a lot of questions and a lot of exploration. So I would say my encouragement to people is, why are you doing this? Why are you building this town to begin with? Do you have a why that's bigger than just the business side of real estate? And do you want to see people live great lives? Do you want people to have close relationships? Do some of the things that we kind of know intuitively are good for us? Can you build those into what you're doing? And I think we all recognize the soulless places that maybe even have nice design and good materiality, but have no soul, and they're missing that. I would suggest that somebody didn't intentionally set out to do this with mission and purpose.
Yeah, and you can certainly feel it in places. I mean, the main spot that I can remember is going to Seabrook, Washington for the first time, where Casey Roloff is building, and just walking around, it feels. There's certain places that feel alive. And I think part of that is Casey probably has a little bit of his soul left in all the blood, sweat, and tears he's put into that place and all the effort he's put in over 20 years. But what I found in the NTBA is why it's been so attractive and helpful to me is a group of just deeply purpose-driven people. I mean, every single person in there has deep purpose in what they're doing. trying to create, and it comes back to the same thing we've been discussing. It's like having the opportunity to shape people's lives and how they live, inspire them on a daily basis, creating a true habitat for humanity. In what environment do humans thrive, and how can we cultivate that?
Well, you are so right there. When you think back to the foundation, part of the reason I joined the board of governors at the Seaside Institute is because the inspiration that Robert and Daryl and Larry Davis were, Robert in particular, to me personally, as I set out on this journey. But you talked about Casey Roloff and Seabrook and Grant Humphreys and Carlton Landing. And I think about Eric Kronberg in Atlanta, who's doing some really important things, and Aaron Lubeck and other people that you've had on the podcast. I do think that it is a mission-driven. It's not a nonprofit, although it sometimes feels that way, especially early in the process. I would say that anybody who is trying to get in, get built, and get out probably wouldn't be attracted to this space. It really is about having a bit of a longer view and trying to create something special. And again, what I'm excited about is proving that that actually works financially as well, because without margin, there is no mission.
Yeah.
And Truett Cathy famously would say that listen, if we don't make money, we can't give money away. We can't do with it. So you need margin. Nobody's against that. And I'm not suggesting that we do town building as nonprofits. That's a different side.
No, and I think we're in the early days of proving out a new model. We live in a capitalistic society, and even everyone that's within the NTBA has either put up a lot of their own money or are leveraging a lot of other people's money. So there's a belief that this is, and I think a lot of evidence that this works, but that's a lot of the process that we're in. And it's a longer process than what typical real estate development is. We're working over a lot longer timelines. And that's where having extra purpose and mission is really important, because there's going to be long, slow times. Over a 10, 20, 30 year timeline, you're going to go through recessions and that sort of thing. And you need to have that purpose deep through the entire core of the organization, not only for the leaders and the team members, but also for the investors. All need to be on board for what you're doing, because it's not IRR. That's not the measure, that we're playing with. I think the topic at Trillith when we were at that roundtable was patient money.
Yeah. Well, I would say that patient capital is important. The capital is really important. Patient capital is good. I would also go ahead and say that, because I'm not someone who brought significant resources to this. I brought what I had, which is my time. Mm-hmm. And I would suggest that people who pour their lives into this, and it's been for the last 10 years, a group of people at Trillith who have just poured their lives into it, in addition to people pouring resources into it. So you got to have people who are passionate about it. You mentioned Casey, and Casey lives there at Seabrook, and every Saturday at 11 o'clock, he takes a group on a tour and basically helps onboard people to why Seabrook was built the way it is. And so that is giving your life to something. And I've experienced that with other placemakers and town builders in this space.
Right. And he's been doing that for 20 years. And that's an example of someone that he put up his own money to make that happen.
Absolutely.
But I think that the pathway I think we'll get into this later on maybe, but for right now, the pathway for younger people getting into this, I think is if you have that mission and purpose, if you can effectively communicate that, if you can show it out on a business plan, but also effectively communicate that and find the financial partners that match your purpose, that's going to probably be the most important part. You're going to go through a lot of people and have a lot of doors closed in your face, but you don't want to partner with someone that's not missionally aligned with you.
Yeah, Levi, I guess that would be where I could provide even the best example is that me personally, I did not come with a deep, rich background in town building or placemaking. I brought a passion and a willingness to work hard and learn, et cetera. And I would suggest, and I do mean this very genuinely, if I can do it, if it can happen with my background, which was not deeply rooted in this, then anybody can do it. It also is one where you recognize that you don't have to know it all. You don't even have to know deeply into specific spaces. You do have to be able to recruit people who do, and to stay out of the way. Let good people make good decisions and engage in leadership in a way that encourages others to bring their gifts to the table. It took a lot of people, and it takes a lot of people, as I know you're experiencing for yourself, to make this town building happen.
I could use a few more people, so. Town Builders is brought to you by Brett Jones, PA. Brett is a practicing land use lawyer in Florida, and as a patron and advocate for new urbanism, he leverages his background in corporate law and personal development experience to help landowners and developers get entitlements and cut through red tape to build human-centric, walkable neighborhoods. Visit brettjonespa.com to find out more. Well, shifting gears back to the human flourishing bit, there's an exciting study that Harvard and Baylor has been doing. I want to get into that and discuss some of the applications for the town builders coming out of that study. But would you be able to just give a little background on that and introduce the topic?
Sure. We were excited about this idea of thriving and flourishing communities and what it takes to make that happen. And along the way, Levi, I've shared this before, I think in other settings, is this idea of, if you would compare this to blue zones, this idea that there are pockets in the world where people live much longer than other places. What makes that happen? And the exploration of that. In a similar way, Harvard and Baylor, and in partnership with Gallup, are doing a 20-year longitudinal study on this idea of human flourishing. What causes people to live happier, richer, deeper, healthier, more purpose-driven lives? And so they've set out with this idea of, again, a 20-year longitudinal study, which I'm so excited about because I believe that it's going to provide data that's going to prove what we anecdotally know to be true and that we've seen and experienced. And those town builder placemakers that I've described already, they would tell you, here's what I've seen. But I don't know that we can prove it right now. And so it's exciting to me that we would have the data that would support that, and also data that would guide us about where to invest more time and more money, more effort to create some of the results that we're looking for. So we're excited that at the NTBA Fall Roundtable, we're going to have some folks from Harvard, from Florida State University, from others who are working in this space to share with us not only the Harvard, Baylor, Gallup study, but also some other things that are happening in that space. And that we could start to get really intentional about setting out to do good and end up doing great.
In defining terms, flourishing, why has flourishing been the word that we've come back to?
Yeah, words matter. And I don't know, I couldn't describe the evolution of how we got to this, other than to say that it had to be a big enough tent that would fit a lot of things under it. And when you think about flourishing, there's so many aspects to it. And the where, the geography, the built environment, the what happens in it, how people treat each other, how, health and safety, so many different things that go into, at the basic level, what we need to do to survive. And then what do we do as we climb this ladder towards thriving? And what are all those elements? And the word, I think, flourishing just really captures that literally you can apply it to so many different things. You could watch a plant, that flourishes when it's got sunlight and it's got water in the right amounts. And it's, quite frankly, some people would play music or sing to it or whatever it is that causes that to flourish. I think that's the image that I've got. And I feel that way about young people. You can watch that with my children and my grandchildren as we pour into them. And there's so many different elements. It's not one single thing. And so I think that's what flourishing kind of captures.
And what I love about what you're describing there is the environment and which is happening. There's programs and inputs, but there's also the sunlight, and there's for children, the environment of the home. What does the home feel like? And that goes into relationships and all these other things. But the term flourishing, more so than maybe thriving or well-being, has that there's a connotation that there's an environment at play here. And I think that's where we come in as town builders, is we're trying to shape that environment. We have all these anecdotes that walkable places are better and public spaces create community and that sort of thing. But it's going to be nice having some of these terms that we can start pulling from.
Well, let me give you a practical example. We laugh a lot about what we call free-range children that live at Trillith.
Yeah.
And I think about the intentionality of how it was built so that they have these spaces to play and gather. And by the way, one of the biggest challenges the outdoor team has is collecting up the bicycles and the toys and the stuff that get left literally in public spaces because they have smaller footprint homes and smaller yards. And so they play together and they leave their stuff. And so there's a gathering spot that we pull it all together and people come down and find their stuff.
That's so great.
The reason I mention that is it points to some intentionality that goes into this thriving, this flourishing. And then when you see it, you say, wow, this is amazing. It's 3:00 in the afternoon after school and all these kids are out playing. And how does that happen? Well, we think that's part of this magic, if you will, that we want to be able to prove works.
Right. And it maybe goes to the onboarding bit a little bit as well, because one of the funny things when I was able to visit Trillith with my team, we were down there and we were walking around and it's just, Trillith is beautiful. I mean, the architecture and everything, and it's always put together and looks good. But I think we saw a bike that was like laying down in front of someone's house and we were like, there's children here. There's life, there's things, there's a little bit of disorder. And it almost felt nice to know that it's like that's what happens when humans live in a space. Bikes get left around, that sort of thing. But we want to create an environment for children where they are free range in one sense, where they feel safe, where parents feel safe to let their kids roam a little bit further. We haven't officially said this at Woodbury, but we're trying to think about how to get the right people there that want to actually live in that space. If you hate children and don't like, loud noises and want to just be a hermit, it's like, maybe this is not the place for you. We only sell to fun people or something like that.
We've had those conversations. We literally say Trillith is not for everybody. If you don't like people playing outside your window, tossing a Frisbee, you're probably not going to like it here. And I think that's okay. I do think that people thrive and flourish though in environments like that. I got to tell you quickly though, you talk about the bike. Here's how, again, anecdotally, I've seen it work. We have a guy named Joe who has started picking up the bikes, taking them home, airing up the tires, lubing the chain, getting the bike in really good working condition, and then posting it on the resident page with a picture and saying, whose bike is this? Here's where you can get it. And he's returning it back to them. And it has become his thing to do.
Leave it better than you found it.
Absolutely. I think it builds on itself. And I think when you set out to do good, when people see people doing good, when people are inspired by Joe, and it makes them want to hopefully pick up the mess after their dog as they're walking. By the way, we have a doggy DNA program that forces that. You have to give us the DNA for your dog. And if you leave that, there is a penalty for that. You find out that was your dog that left it. That was part of, I would say, an attempt to help us live better together. And it's actually worked really well.
Because there's that balance of accountability as well and that sort of thing. So how do you get more Joes? How have you guys taken this position of onboarding and going back to the programming bit? You've designed it in such a way. How do you get the residents self-governing? How have you onboarded them? What inputs is your team still putting in to create culture and life at Trillith?
Well, we're always working it and have since the beginning. And I'm going to say it's not easy. The original folks, when we first got started, we took a page out of something that Seaside had done. I was down visiting Seaside early on, and somebody said that, told me that only about 15% of their residents are year-round residents. And the way that community gets built, when you have 85% of your people are coming from out of town, there's a core group of people who live there. And they said every Friday, they would naturally start about 3:00 in the afternoon meeting. They said actually drinking about 3:00 and about by 6 or 7, they'd break up into groups and go to dinner. And they recognized that pattern started to happen that every Friday. And the idea was that you knew that it was only going to be a week before you'd see your friends if you got busy and whatever, but that every week they had this connecting point. So we started that at Trillith intentionally, and just in our sales center when there was 20 residents living there, just putting out some food and drink and gathering music and food, and you have a party. And we would have that for a couple hours every Friday. We did that for 2.5, almost 3 years, until we got so big that we had to move it to a bigger venue. And next thing you know, it became larger than, it wasn't the intimacy. But I would say that, so from the beginning, building relationship, connecting people, without conversation, there is no relationship. And so helping people with conversation. And then I think the HOA is always been seen as probably the enforcers and the rule, the ones who manage the rules side of what we do. We have not used that vehicle as much. We did create something called the RAC, our Resident Advisory Council, which ultimately led to something called Belong at Trillith. And so the residents organizing themselves. This idea for us was that we could organize for them, but it's not going to be nearly as meaningful as if they organize for themselves. So I would say facilitating that kind of conversation is really important, and then having it be resident-led. We joke about having a cruise director. You can put somebody out there who creates activities and that kind of stuff, but it's not nearly as meaningful as organizing people to organize themselves. And so I would encourage people that direction. It does take a little bit of investment in a person or people or as part of their job to help make sure that is seeded. But we also want people to naturally want to do it. And that's part of the magic, I think.
Okay, so getting back to, we're bouncing back and forth on this on this flourishing measure, but I know it's an important topic, particularly for yourself, and sort of starting to identify how human flourishing continues to work into what we're doing as town builders. So just for people listening, the Harvard, Baylor, Gallup study that we're discussing has 6 measures that they're gonna, I guess, produce data on, but it's happiness and satisfaction, physical and mental health, meaning and purpose, character and virtue, social relationships, and then financial and material stability. So in your mind, how can we leverage what Harvard and Baylor and Gallup are going to be doing over the next 20 years? And how much of it is just keeping an eye on, hey, hopefully they're going to start producing data that we can use to prove what we're doing anecdotally.
Yeah, well, we're very fortunate to have one of the professors who are part of this, who are going to join the NTBA roundtable at Amelia Island in the fall. And he's going to share his overview of the study and what they're doing, the fact that it's in 40 languages, it's in 20-something countries, and that it is 20 years, and that it's in year 2 right now. The early year 1 results that they shared, in fact, we hosted a Flourishing Summit at Trillith recently where those results were shared. It's way early, so you can't take a 1-year baseline study and gather much. But over time, they wanted to demonstrate, again, not just anecdotally, but with data over a long period of time, the differences between surviving and thriving is how I would say it. And that these people that are having deeper relationships, that have a sense of purpose, who have a better physical and mental health because of their behaviors, are living better lives. So again, I'm excited that we'll have some data to prove it. Really interested in hearing what the early results are so we can build that into the work that we're doing.
One of the things that, in reading through the initial findings of the study, one of the things I thought was really interesting was that they had community well-being as one of the things that was inextricably connected to individual human flourishing. And that's something that we talk about a lot, that we're social creatures, that we do well in community with others. And community is a loaded word in and of itself. A lot of people try not to use it because then there's connotations of 55 plus communities and that sort of thing. Me trying to convince people of that here in Idaho, 45 minutes from here, we have a highway that just dead ends into wilderness. And so people move to Idaho to get away from other people in often cases. And so I run into that aspect where everyone's trying to find their own little private Idaho and get away. But can you speak to that community well-being as a measure of individual well-being?
I think one of the, to answer your previous question was, why should we care about it? In part, I would suggest that I know that they are looking for communities of practice, communities that are literally could be studied deeper. And so we're going to get the results of that over time, where we're going to see the role that community plays in it. I think we all intuitively know that a better environment, that a cleaner, safer, better place is preferable to the one that's not. What we don't know is what are those specific things that need to happen within that space beyond what we would assume are logical to us. And I guess I'm excited about the idea that what are the not so intuitive things? What are the small things that, wow, if we just did this?
Right.
And I don't know what that answer is. I think of, is it just having a candy store, or an ice cream shop, or something that we find out, wow, there's something about this one thing. So I'm excited about the things that we haven't even thought about. But then I'm also going to, I think, be encouraged by the things that we intuitively know to be right, but now can point to some facts that say that that's true.
Well, people are hyper complex, and I think it's one of the things that keeps our job so interesting is trying to provide enough environment and opportunity for everyone to play within. That's going to be something interesting that comes from that study, especially as it broadens to 20 plus different countries and that sort of things. What are the common things as humans that we all need to flourish? And then we can play out different aspects of that and what we're doing. But it's become a big realization for myself stepping into this career of starting as, I'd say as in real estate development, and then moving beyond that, realizing that placemaking is really what I was passionate about, the opportunity to develop real estate and create a specific place. And you're starting to enter into this third aspect of it, which is the programming of a place. There's a lot more, I'm realizing sociology involved in what we're doing as well, because we're creating habitats for humans, places that people live. My dad always says architecture is the best form of art because we live in it. And so I love that there's this conversation that we're having is deeply complex, and there's going to be continuous iterations of it moving forward, and people are going to try it in different ways.
Well, there's another side of it too, that once we figure out what some of these things are, it should guide how we talk about what we do. Right. And so I'm in environments with Congress for New Urbanism, with the Institute, with NTBA, where we talk a lot about what we do and how we do it. And I think we get pretty caught up in street wits and things that explain how and aren't as focused on the why. So I believe this will inform. I don't think there's anybody that's come to Trillith and measured our streets to see how wide they were or how close the houses were together or things that we know were important. And so how we talk about what we do, I think will be informed by a lot of this because it's human. It's human in how it connects to people.
Can you explain more on that?
Yeah. So the term new urbanism, as an example, is not one that is common vernacular. It's not something that anybody sets out, hey, I'm looking for a new urbanist community, right? So what are the words? And we do things like we talk about walkable, we talk about healthy environments, we talk about the idea that could we break things down? Could we talk about ourselves in a way that actually people connect with, that they want to be part of? We talked about those free range kids. That how do we describe that in a way that is meaningful to people? I will say that cautionary. I talked about, wow, this feels like the 50s here. Well, not everybody's 50s is the same or is viewed as good. So that probably wasn't the right way to describe. When I do talk about free range kids and we get into it, people understand what it is that I'm talking about. So I don't know. I guess just this idea that these 6 areas that they're studying are connected to how people's lived experience is in certain different communities. And if we can start to describe that lived experience and why living it here matters when you think about the community that you're building, Levi, what your marketing materials look like after understanding what the human impact is of a place like yours.
I want to take a moment to talk to you about one of our sponsors, Harvey Points. Harvey Points are architectural designers that have worked on new urbanist projects nationwide. With a blend of bold ideas and thoughtful design, they have experience site planning everything from infill projects in pocket neighborhoods to master planned communities. During the site planning process, they develop floor plans that tailor fit to each lot, giving you a comprehensive plan to take forward. They also provide realistic 3D renderings that help the whole team visualize the project from early stages, as well as being a great tool to get city planners and council members on board to approve your new development. We all want to see more unique communities built, and Harvey Points would love to assist you in that pursuit. Visit their website, harveypoints.com. That's Harvey with a B, or follow them on Instagram at Harvey Points. Just being frank, I love coming to the roundtables and having these really incredible, engaging conversations. That's what I've loved about this podcast and the different levels at which people are thinking about it. One thing that I try to, in defense of developers, and just I think something to keep in mind, it's like we're all practitioners in what we're doing, and thinking about human flourishing is the purpose behind what we're doing. But it's sometimes hard to hold that in unison when I have 2 interviews a day and I have to meet with the marketing team and the finance team. We don't have enough money to do this. And, there's just fires constantly to put out every single day. It's trying to hold this banner up, this ideal of what you're working towards, why you're just taking fire constantly. That's what it feels like oftentimes, and why the peer-to-peer nature of the NTBA, I think, is so wonderful.
I think talking to people who've done it, who are doing it, really does matter, and getting together. And anybody who's listening to this who doesn't know what we're talking about, we really just gather twice a year in roundtable format. And people will share ideas from the stage, but then we'll also, it's the interaction that happens over 2.5 days. We also go on field trips. We're those weird people that there's 70 or 80 people walking down the middle of a street
with measuring tapes
in walkable environments with headsets on. So there's a nerd factor to this, right? There is a understanding the deep detail that nobody else cares about. And Levi, I will say that's the other thing that we probably need to get better at, is understanding what the customer cares about and how much they want to know. And they don't all need to become new urbanists to understand it, but we need to, and we need to go deep as placemakers in understanding what causes this thriving.
That's one thing I've noticed that your team has done well, and I'm sure it's intentional because I know how much language matters to you, is we use a lot of the new urbanist terminology. And I've done this for myself too. I never want to die on the hill of new urbanism. I want to build incredible places. And I think new urbanists really have the grip on that right now. But I think that we could lose sight of what we're doing, which for me, the deeper purpose is the human aspect of it. The design is great and everything, but if we follow that, it's going to have its own ditch that it runs into. And I think making sure that we're keeping the focus on how are we serving people, because that's really, I see as the core of what we're doing is creating that habitat for humanity.
Well, Levi, I've recently made a transition from being CEO at Town of Trillith and Trillith Development to more of a co-founder role, releasing my day-to-day responsibilities. I'm really excited that Jake Pittman, who was with us for 9 years, has become the town manager.
Wonderful.
And Jake will carry that forward and care about people and love people, because that's what's been modeled by the community all along. And so, in fact, Jake just joined NTBA, and he should be with us in the fall. So,
oh, wonderful.
I mentioned that to say you do have to care about what you do in a deeper way. And again, it has to be modeled. Our chief visionary, Dan Cathy, is big on onboarding our staff, and he wants us to onboard every resident. It's a little harder to require it, but it actually really is important to do. It's interesting, this idea of onboarding. You wouldn't normally think that a new resident who moves, there would be onboarded. And we do it a lot more informally than that, than you might.
You're like, did I just join a cult accidentally or something?
That's right. You don't want to scare them that way. And you can't require it. But there are some things that we do, things we invite them to, invitations that we make, making sure that their experience at their closing is really, really good. Making sure that they understand what it is that they bought into here through the sales process. And I think we've talked before about this may not be for everybody.
Right.
We do know that our sales process is a little bit longer than typical, as people come back multiple times to kind of figure out, is this place for real? And is this really what I think it is? That kind of thing. But I would say anything you can do to intentionally onboard, even with their documents that you give, that just talks about, when we had an incident where one of our residents misbehaved, we communicated back out to people that this is not how we treat each other and how we treat people. And we were very clear about that. I don't want to go into that detail, but just know that how we care for each other, how we love each other, which is not something you hear a lot through your HOA. I think it reflects through the people and through our team, through our salespeople who are really, really important to the process as well.
Can you give a few more sort of concrete examples of what onboarding a new homeowner might look like?
Yeah, depending on the size of your community, I think having that weekly reception for new folks or once a month. We talked about Casey doing regular tours can be helpful to do that. It could be as easy as a founder's breakfast once a month, once a quarter, something where you have an opportunity to communicate, I think, how you do your closing and that it can be more than just a transaction. The closing gift that you give and how you communicate through that process. And then because we've got to focus on health and wellness, and we have a fitness and wellness center as a core part of what we do, we made the decision, our chief visionary in particular, that he wanted people to get that grounding. And so there was a 1-year membership, which was at a financial investment. So maybe it's just a discounted situation, but something that sends a clear message that this is what we care about, and we want you to care about it too.
That's wonderful. Those are great examples. I'm thinking about that actively right now and how we do these things.
Lunch with Levi. I'm telling you, that's the new thing. You just create a lunch with Levi and onboard them.
We'll have to check the calendar to see if we can do that. Well, so Rob, you're in the stage of your career where you're sort of shifting gears yourself. You're president of the NTBA. What do you see for these next 50 years? Maybe you can tell me what the right timeline is, but what do you see for the future of NTBA and where do you hope it keeps growing?
I think of NTBA as part of a movement of new urbanism. And as practitioners, 75% of our members are developers and need to be people that are working specifically on projects. We've been in an interesting conversation about, do we grow? We have waiting lists for people to join. There's been a group that have said and a thought that, hey, we want to keep this intimate and small and these roundtables work. I want our impact to increase and grow. And so these podcasts are one of the ways that we're doing that, Levi. So I want to thank you, literally, as the president of NTBA, thank you personally for your investment of time in it. I think it's really important to get our messaging out. I do think our influence can get broader and deeper, and it's very meaningful because this is not philosophical. All right, this is not just theory. This is happening in the trenches every day, and people are living in the places that we are designing and building. For me personally, I want to help build cool places. I want people to be very intentional about what they do. And so I'm spending my time helping folks probably more at the vision level at the early stages with meaning and purpose and be intentional about it. And I think we have that opportunity. I think as an organization, though, we have a chance to come and create a next generation of placemaker, which is really, really going to be important to us. And organizations oftentimes age out as they get comfortable with the population that's in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond. And now that I'm in my 60s, that's very young, by the way. It's
very young.
Very young.
Especially in Trillith years.
It is. But I have even more kind of a commitment to a next generation. So I don't know if I've answered your question there, but I think the role for people who are in the trenches doing this and have their money at risk and certainly their time and the most valuable asset, their passion and time at risk, I think there's always going to be a role for something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that as a organization or association, we're practitioners first and foremost. So yes, theory can develop from the association, but I think what's more likely are things like this human flourishing study, which I think pairs really well with what we're doing. Because we're practitioners, there's actually the opportunity for groups to come in and study what we're doing. And that's for me what I hope happens over the next number of years and over my lifetime is that data can actually start being shared, both on the flourishing aspect and I mentioned before on the financial aspect too. I think that what's happening, the zoomed out lens of where we're at in the development world today is the suburban model is still well and alive. We're in a housing shortage and we're still sprawling. And there's people still advocating for that method of development. And what I see my role as is proving out town building as an effective model of development that can be repeated and hopefully at some point becomes a dominant model of development to sort of stop the bleeding of our poor urban fabric and what's being created. And then there's great groups like the Incremental Development Alliance and others that are coming along and retrofitting suburbia, that sort of thing. But I see us kind of on the front lines as far as trying to prove out a new model and stop the bleeding of what's happening to our urban fabric right there. So,
well, I think you're right, Levi. I think the concern I would have is that as we have so much missing middle housing and it's not affordable or attainable, that we would go and try to build the cheapest and the quickest and et cetera, without the intentionality. And that doesn't help as well. So if we can find this right balance, and I do think we have to address this attainability issue. If there's any one thing that I'm disappointed in, it's that we have been, with so many factors, including what happened during COVID and price escalation and cost and inflation, et cetera, it's 40% or more to build now than it was, and the cost of money. It's become very, very hard to create something that's attainable. We don't, by the way, use the word affordable because it's such a loaded word, right?
right. Well, and the elephant in the room too is that people will look at places like Trillith or other new urban communities and say, that's not affordable or attainable, And I think that there's a reality there that we need to grasp. And I think that I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on it. I see it as we are in the early stages. There is a lot more effort that gets put in. In often cases, we're not shooting for the bottom of the market in any sort of way. Right now, it would be hard to compete with a national builder in that regard of trying to go after the very starter bottom of the market. But over time, we should get better at what we're doing and have more economies of scale and become more efficient.
We need to. I do think it's hard to compete on a cost per square foot with a national builder. I am very concerned about the trend of build to rent, and that our starter homes are all being owned by large corporations, and that the idea that you could start home ownership, at a certain level. And generationally, I know that's one of the challenges that we face, is that we have a society and a generation that has expectations that are higher than are easily met financially. And they see what their parents have had and they want that, but we have to have a path to home ownership that has starter homes.
Right.
And right now, they don't exist in the market. I would suggest, though, that those starter homes don't have to be built in a cookie cutter fashion, and that it doesn't cost a lot of money to be a little more intentional about how you create them. I do think we can get really smart about attached housing and creating attached housing that works really well, which we've experienced here with our townhomes. And this mix of a rental product and owned product that's well designed, can live well together. And we have a lot of people who've come in and moved into our loft apartments who have rented and then have ultimately built or moved into homes on the home ownership side.
But you need to provide that ladder for people to climb up. And one of the things that was encouraging from a previous episode with Lawrence Komar was he was showing that actually the way that new urbanists build neighborhoods doesn't actually have to be more expensive. In fact, it can actually be cheaper in some instances. And he's done whole studies showing that. And that the most important aspect to what we're talking about is the layout of the neighborhood. The housing and the design of the housing comes second to that. And there are ways to build. There's a lot of people proving out ways you can build attainable housing. And so I think it's just putting these things together that people are making headway in all of these different areas, and that we have the opportunity to start pulling together some of the information that's coming out of the new urbanism movement. I mean, we're still in the very early years of what's happening, but there's a lot of things that I can be discouraged about looking at the scene, of what's unfolding in America and just even on the global stage, things within the housing market that don't seem to be trending in the right direction. But as an ever optimist, I feel like how I'm looking at the situation currently is we're kind of in this Overton window portion of the history of our housing where I think people are starting to see, okay, what we've been doing is not working for us. We've kind of gone through this recently in America in the regards to health. We kind of realized okay, maybe all this preserved food that we've been eating for so long and taken for granted, maybe that's not the best thing for us. And maybe we should start shifting our models, doing the same thing with technology, realizing that technology is kind of taking over areas of our life. And it's happened naturally. And maybe we should start putting barriers up. And I think people are starting to come to that point because housing is becoming such a pain point. People are finally starting to think about it at a much broader scale. And that now there's the opportunity of, yes, we've done stuff poorly in the past. It's gotten us to this point though. And now we have the opportunity to start fixing it. We can't fix what's in the past, but we can at least fix it going forward.
That's well said. The thing that we have to resist, you mentioned about health, the idea there is a drug that we can take that's going to fix our health versus, getting down to the basics of it. I mean, we've talked about smaller footprint homes that are on smaller lots closer together that have shared spaces that we use outdoors. All those kind of things done well are cheaper, are less expensive and should make that more affordable and attainable. Attaching our homes, having shared walls, et cetera. All of those things can work, but we also don't have to dumb this down. I am excited that it seems like generationally the McMansions are not the thing anymore, these really big homes. We know this next generation cares more about existing and next generation cares more about experiences and relationships and less about owning stuff. And so I think those are all encouraging signs towards can we create communities that are more attainable, affordable, and allow people more freedom. We know that the bigger homes and the more stuff you have, the more your stuff owns you. We just have absolutely experienced that here. I will say one thing fun, we have a hotel here, and to have a hotel within a couple blocks, 3 blocks of your house, where when you have guests, they have a place to stay. It makes so much more sense than having a 4 or 5 bedroom home, because once or twice a year, you might have visitors in your home and you might need that space. And so just another way that community design can make sense.
Right. Last question for you here to close it out. You were mentioning wanting to have the younger generation come up and come into the NTBA. And over the next 50 years, there's going to be a changing landscape. It's very hard for young people to get into this line of work because there's a lot of barriers to entry financially, as well as just the complexity of what we're doing. You need to be able to have leadership qualities and bring people on board. If you could leave young people who want to get into this line of work with one piece of advice, what would that be?
I don't know that it would be one piece, but I would say, one, have a why, have a sense of purpose and mission for what you want to do. I would say connect with like-minded people and get in groups and join and volunteer. My daughter went to work for NASA after coming out of the Peace Corps. And the advice she got from Dad was simple as we drove to Houston from Atlanta to move into her new apartment, was show up early, stay late, volunteer for every assignment that you can, and prove who you are and your work ethic and that you care, and then build relationships. And so I think it's as simple as that. I really do think it's showing up is a big part of it. Being intentional about who you align yourself with. Again, as somebody who's not well-resourced myself to go out and build a community, I would say even if I look back at my career that started very much at the bottom, it was those things that I just described to you.
Wonderful. Rob, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Appreciate it, Levi. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Have a good one.